morning, everyone. You're all in here real tight and cozy this morning, and it seems cooler in here too, so I see jackets on many people. So I guess they didn't get you cozy enough, huh? Everyone have a good evening? Good. I heard the music was good, and so good that you had a good time. The first question I have, if a tax rate is approved by referendum and it is in a TIF district, is it correct that the TIF district does not receive any dollars on the referendum rate? And that's true. So referendums approved from here on out, or at least until the law change, I like to say, they're excluded from the TIF is excluded from getting any money from that referendum rate. So the TIF rate the rate for the captured taxes is going to be the taxing district rate minus the referendum rate. This became effective for taxes of 2009 paid 2010. So ever since then, any referendums approved for that tax year till the present the TIF isn't entitled to receive a distribution. Hopefully we don't have any counties out there that this is not the case, because we've been trying to catch this as each year goes by. For on the abstract itself, when DLGF loads the funds to the abstract, those referendum funds that the TIF isn't entitled to money from, if you will, they are labeled post 2009. So there are some counties that have referendums that were approved before that time, and so those funds are not labeled or do not have the label of post 2009, and so that's how you can tell on the abstract. But any referendum approved now and into the future, the TIF and a TIF district's involved, and the TIF isn't going to receive any of the money on that rate. The next question is that the treasurer has recently told us that many counties don't use treasurer receipts for excise. Throughout your presentation, you mentioned treasurer's receipts. Are we okay if our treasurer doesn't use receipts? Well, the short answer is no. The more explained answer is that hopefully we hope that the treasurer means they don't actually have a receipt book that they get out and do the handwritten receipt. That their receipting process is an automated process with the computer system, and that their receipting process does create a receipt. It may not be printed, which is okay, as long as that receipt is retained within the system and can be brought up to examine in an audit and any researching that might be done. So we feel pretty comfortable that the treasurer's receipting systems do issue receipts. It's just not the old handwritten separate receipt book type process that hopefully you've eliminated through automation in your computer system, and that there is still an issuance of a receipt. You're just not seeing, or the treasurer isn't actually writing out a receipt as they would have in the past. If you find that not to be the case, that there simply isn't any recording of a receipt in any fashion, be it electronic or otherwise, I think that the three of us would probably want to know that and take a look at that. But we feel pretty comfortable there's probably a receipt being issued. But if not, please let us know. We won't tattletale on you that you contacted us. So we have ways of doing things discreetly, and but anyway. Well, it was nice to be here. That was it. I don't know what it says about that short number of, or limited number of questions, I either just confused the heck out of you, or you already knew all that you needed to know about the subject matter that I covered. And but I'd like to think that I helped you learn a little more, and that we all learned more in this conference. It's been a good conference, I think, and look forward to seeing you in the spring, and maybe hopefully sooner. So, and have a good trip home.
Thank you, Dan. Debbie and I are trying to use our technology. Actually, we just don't want to do this when we get back to the office. So we cut and pasted and did a lot of, tried to do our typing last night. So forgive any typos in the questions and answers, but we feel they're closer to ready to go into the county bulletin, and this does really help us try to expedite that process and get your Q&A published a little quicker. So, so we've been trying to put it in the computer. And we don't have too many today either. With that, I will go ahead and get started with the Q&A. First question was on combining contiguous parcels. A taxpayer comes into the auditor's office and wants to combine the contiguous parcels. Do they need to provide us with a new deed listing all the legal descriptions they want combined? And you can see the IC code there. It does tell us, it gives us some guidance on this. It says that on real property interests that are created from previously existing parcels or parcels, the auditor's endorsement, tax lien, apportionment of assessed value and delinquent taxes. And it says, before an owner records a transfer of an ownership interest in a parcel of real property that is created after the person became the owner of the real property and is created either from a larger previously existing parcel or a combination of previously existing smaller parcels, the owner must submit, except as provided in Section 9, which is Marion County, the owner must submit the instrument transferring the real property to the county auditor to be entered for taxation. The auditor shall endorse the instrument duly entered for taxation, subject to final acceptance for transfer or another endorsement that's authorized in that chapter. In Marion County, it goes through the assessor's office rather than the auditor's office, so that's the exception that's in Section 9. So for most of you, yes, there has to be an instrument that they're bringing you that has the new legal description of this new, bigger parcel. Now, that could be a deed, it could be something else possibly, but it does need to be an instrument. Even though they may have owned all the smaller parcels before, they've got to bring you something. Oh, now she's adding questions. I almost put it in here because I knew you were going to ask, but I didn't because it's been asked so many times before. She asked, do all the taxes have to be paid on the smaller parcels before you can do the transfer? What that statute says, and you can find it in the Q&A before, but it's in this, it's still in IC 6-1.1-5. It's just a different section. I don't think it's 5.5, but it's right around there. What it says is they have to pay everything for which the due date has passed, which somewhat helps, but not completely. Not completely, okay? Yes. Yes, it does. It says that in there in another section. It does have to be recorded. The new instrument has to be recorded. So you've got to endorse it, and then it's got to go to the recorder's office. So it's much like a regular property transfer. It's just that it's the same owner. That's what they had before. The second question we got is, we were written up by State Board of Accounts for lack of internal control in payroll. We are a small office. What procedures can you recommend for us? Basically, internal controls are very different, and they're up to you. You just have to have adequate ones, and they're different for every place. There's no, and that's what makes them so hard, is there's no key that we can give you to say, if you do these 5 things in a small office, you're good. If you do these 7 things in a larger office, you're good. There's basically 5 elements to internal control. One is the environment. Well, that's going to be different everywhere you go. You have different staff, different skill sets, different knowledge, different setup of where your counter is, different place in the courthouse where your office is. It's different. And then all of the others can be different as well. You know, the control activities are the things that the procedures you put in place. So those are the things you can control a lot easier than some of the others. But risk assessment, your monitoring, all of those things are unique to your office. And so when we come in to write this finding that you have a lack of internal controls or a control deficiency, we have to do a lot of work to get there. We don't just get in and look around. We have to gain an understanding of what your control system entails. Then we have to test the key controls and find out if you have controls that have been implemented. Maybe they haven't been implemented, but if they have been implemented, are they working as you intended them to work? And are you aware of that? Are you monitoring that? Are you thinking of new things to put in place? All of that goes into that finding. So Debbie and I would be willing to speak with you individually about your finding, and we would, you know, need to go back to our working papers and dig this out and make sure we could give you some specific things that would improve your internal controls. And we'd be happy to try to work with you and make some recommendations. You should also feel free and I know there's been a lot of internal controls commented on this last year because of some, frankly, some deficiencies we had when we were reviewed, and we've had to change things and improve our documentation. And in order to prove our documentation, we asked a lot more questions. And when we did that, we found out sometimes we had a control that maybe we should have been taking exception to before and weren't. So we'd be happy to talk to you. We also know that our field staff, feel free to ask them at the exit conference, can you make recommendations? You know, we're not going to decide for you, and we're going to try to make recommendations that are as cost effective as we can. And there are some things you can do in a small office. It's going to seem inefficient to you, you know, because you're used to doing everything yourself. Well, it's all well and good until you have a person who's doing everything that feels entitled to do something wrong. So do contact us if this was your question, or even if you're just in the same situation. We'd be happy to work with you because we want you to get rid of those. And internal controls, next year, even though we don't have elections, we have enough new turnover in officials that have just started in 2013 that we will be really doing a concentration again on our back to basics and internal controls all again. And so we'll go back over it, and maybe you've learned a few things since you've had these findings that you can relate to and take some things back to your office and make some improvements. Okay. Is there any time that a judge has more control over the uses of the courthouse than the commissioners? Well, you can really tell your audit agency is probably not going to be the one to help you on this one. Sorry. But we've seen this happen, so we're not surprised by it really, but really we do a lot of digging through codes. We read a lot of codes, and in our digging in the past, we have not seen any statute or case law that in particular that we think is going to specifically zero in on this issue. You know, in general, there's supposed to be a balance of power with the judiciary and the executive and the branches of government. It's supposed to be balanced, but it's not really the same powers. And so who has which power always becomes kind of a battle. And so really, I think you're going to, if it gets to the point where the commissioners really have to take some action and they feel that there's an imbalance in that power, they're going to have to get with their attorney and find out what legal support they have to go talk to the judge and work with the judge on this. But yeah, makes for entertaining times, doesn't it? And you're just kind of stuck in the middle being the auditor. We have a judge that thinks he does not have to answer to anyone on how he spends his money. How do you handle this, and does he have to answer to anyone? Well, you get the age-old answer that he's elected just like you're elected, and you're answerable to the electorate that puts you in office. But at the same time, there are a few controls for the balance of power that were put in place, and I know that's probably what's causing you the headaches. County council does have to appropriate before they can disperse money on almost everything. There's a few statutory exceptions. And if the judge does want to mandate the use of unappropriated funds or mandate the appropriation of monies, then there is a process that they're supposed to go through. And I know they often don't. They will just order you to pay it, and I'm not going to tell you to not go by that order because I don't want to be held in contempt just like you don't want to be held in contempt. So I audited prisons. I'm not interested in visiting county jails. I would be happy to visit you, though, but not in the jail. So the rule of the court that applies here is Trial Rule 60.5. It does have a procedure where they're to meet with the county council and explain. The council's supposed to explain then why they do not feel they need to appropriate those monies and why they're not going to. Then there's an actual trial. Clark County's been through it, they know. It's not a fun procedure, but it is supposed to be one that puts it out there in the public. I don't think you're going to find a judge that rules against another judge. So they're going to get their appropriation most likely, or to get to spend their unappropriated dollars. But there is supposed to be a process whereby at least they meet with the county council and they either mediate or they go to trial, and before they do such a thing. More judge questions. How do you deal with a judge who tells you if the commissioners don't approve a claim, he will just mandate it be paid? Well, this gets into another area. I mean, we talked about mandate of funds, but that's when there's no appropriation for whatever the claim is that they're submitting. If you look in the county auditor's manual, and this part's still applicable to this day, it's Chapter 7, page 4. We believe the judge is empowered to make allowances on court claims. And so the commissioner's approval of court claims is not necessary. Now, that's our position. It's not how all of you do this, but that is our position. And it has been our position for a very long time because that manual's very old. So, this might be something that you have to work out within your county exactly how you do that, but I don't think our audit position is going to help the commissioners who don't want to approve a court claim. Okay, so might not want to show them this. What if you have a judge that tells you he doesn't even have to let the commissioners have a room in the courthouse? It's getting really good. That starts to get tough. I would go, at that point, if the commissioners are coming to you for help, I would say they need to be going to the county attorney there are some statutes that talk about commissioners' responsibilities for the courthouse, the commissioners assigning space in the courthouse for certain offices to be in the courthouse. So there's some statutes that might support the commissioner's argument. Of course, the judge is going to know some statutes that would support the judge's arguments. So then it's just up to them to figure out a way to resolve whatever disputes they've got going on. Maybe the judge can mandate enough funds to build a new courthouse. What, if any, consequences are the consequences of an auditor that does not get the required training? The statute on the elected officials' trainings, none of them, including the auditors, has consequences listed. So, like any other statute that you have to comply with, I think your risk is that there's a possibility that it gets reported as noncompliance in an audit report. There's a possibility it gets reported to the newspaper or something like that, which would be unpleasant, but it's not, they don't specify a specific consequence. Does an oath of office have to be filed along with the public official's bond upon recording? There is Indiana code that you can see that clearly does state that every officer who is required to give a bond does have to have a copy of the oath recorded with the bond. Sorry, I thought that was a Tammy. Number 9, in regards to approval of the bond to the elected or appointed officials, how and where is the approval to be made? Signature and official seal on the bond or a separate document? Indiana code does also address this, and it tells us that a person who approves an official bond shall write the approval on the bond. And then, does this process have to be done upon renewal of a bond? And does the bond have to be renewed each year or each new term? I've given you the Indiana code that talks about officials' bonds, and I know it's kind of confusing because it has changed back and forth a few times, but we are back to where you are allowed to have a term bond. If that bond for your first term is then renewed for your second term's coverage under the statute, it should be separate coverage. I mean, it should be a new $30,000 bond. But if that's the way they work it with the paperwork and you get something that looks like a renewal, we would recommend you go through the same process for your second term's coverage that you went through and get the approval and get the oath filed with it. The previous county auditor had made an agreement with a local attorney that should have been run by the county attorney first. It appears as though the agreement does not comply with the state statute regarding deeds. This agreement was made 4 years ago and a precedent has been set. Can I forfeit the agreement or do I have to comply with it? I don't agree with their agreement. This is a situation where, you know, this agreement, if it's in writing, is a contract and it's currently in force, whether it's valid or not. And so we can't really tell you, and I hate those disclaimers for legal things that attorneys always give, but what I will say is that this is a situation where if you don't agree with it, I do think the county attorney needs to review that agreement, review the applicable statutes for whatever it is, the service or whatever the agreement entails, to see if it really is a valid contract that was entered into by the previous auditor. There might be some clauses where that can be canceled even if it is valid. You need to look at those things, and you need to look and see if maybe it can be voided somehow. So you have to discuss it with the county attorney. You have to see if there's some support for going forward in a different manner than what you have in the past based on this agreement. But do keep in mind that Hendricks County had a case where a former auditor entered a contract. In that case, it was determined that that contract was void. It was not valid because that auditor did not have the authority to enter into a contract by the Board of Commissioners, who is really your contracting body. Now, I don't know if in this case that you wrote the question about, the county auditor had authority to go ahead and purchase these services or enter into this agreement or not, but that case law is something the county attorney might also want to look at. And I think it's Nancy Marsh versus Kurt Coonrod in Hendricks County, and it went all the way to Supreme Court and was deemed to be a void contract. So you may have some of the similar situation. So just make the county attorney aware that there's some case law out there to look at as well. No, Nancy was the one who got sued for not paying the contract she felt was not valid and the commissioners felt was not valid. Keep Nancy's name out of it, sorry, but it's all right on the court case. That's how you find it in Lexis. It wasn't Cinda, it wasn't Nancy. I appropriated money out of the Auditor's Ineligible Deductions Fund and went through the budget process. I put in for a scanner with an estimate of $35,000 and for new files and workstations of $30,000, as well as new tax software. Nothing was cut, and the council signed the adoption. Now that I'm trying to plan ahead, council is now telling me they need to discuss what I can spend. I put all the expenses from county general fund except salaries into the auditor's ineligible deductions fund. They feel they should be in control of the bigger items. I gave all the IC codes on each fund when I put their budget books together so they could understand the workings. What rights do I have? P.S. All the money was raised prior to June 30th of 2013. Well, I don't know about rights, but you have some responsibilities. And with responsibility usually comes some freedom, so hopefully it's balanced. You do have to comply with the adopted budget. And the county should also have a purchasing policy for purchasing goods or services, no matter which it is. So you have to follow that purchasing policy. The county commissioners are the purchasing agency. They may, in that purchasing policy, designate you to be a purchasing agent for the county and give you some authorities as to what you can purchase and how you are to purchase it. So if they have given you some abilities to do that and some authority to do that, you just follow the policy and you're able to purchase, and then the commissioners would be the ones to approve the claims at the end of the process, as long as you're still within your budget. With that, I am going to turn it over to Debbie Gibson to wrap up the final questions. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, you're so quiet. I know you're tired. We're all tired. It has been a very absorbing week. So I only have a few questions here, and then we'll get you ready for your meeting here. Can the county council reduce the judge's supplemental pay? Yes, I can for the next year. So that's an easy answer. You can't. Well, I don't know what happened there. Oh, wait a minute. Did that help? Yeah. Okay. It was ours, though. Okay. Oh, okay, in their, yeah, in next, but you're saying in their whole term? Okay, okay. Make a note of that, so we can look into that. Thank you. You saved me again. Okay, can bonuses be given out of the auditor's ineligible homestead fund? Does it have to be appropriated? Per IC 6-1.1-36-17E, one of the purposes that the fund may be used for is expenses of the county auditor's office. So bonuses for the auditor's employees may be paid out of this fund. Bonuses are considered compensation, so it would need to be in the salary ordinance, and this fund does need to be appropriated. So, in other words, yes, the county council would be involved. If the clerk and prosecutor want to give 4D workers bonuses out of incentive money, would that need county council approval? This is one of the rare cases where they do not. IC 31-25-4-3 only requires county council approval for increases or supplementing an elected official's salary, but not for the employees. And there's case law for salaries to be paid out without council approval, and it's Plummer versus Hagel. So. Uh, 40 incentive funds. But, yeah, but this is incentive. Sir, I know what you're talking about with Circular A87, but incentive funds are not, I'm not going to say they're not completely subject to A87, but it's, yeah, this is not the program dollars. Incentive dollars is because that you performed. And so they are giving the county back money. They're actually giving the state back money for performance and for getting some of the TANF funding back. So it's not like a 4D program. Okay.
We've worked with Cynthia on this several times, and we have not in an audit applied that county council salary ordinance as being the county's plan for 4D or anything related to or having to be in place for 4D extra pay from the incentive fund.
So does that mean then that it does not have to be in the salary ordinance?
Correct. Okay. Probation officer salaries are set by state. Are they exempt employees? Should they be hourly or salary? Are they exempt from overtime? These are really questions that you should contact the U.S. Department of Labor about. I know that they've had a lot of turnover there in the recent years. Usually, we like to be able to give you a direct contact person, but because of many retirements, I really don't have a good contact person, so I'm giving you the Indianapolis phone number, which is 317-226-6801. If all state senators and state representatives had to sit through 2 years of auditor conference meetings outlining changes in procedures, I believe the legislator would change how local unit tax, distribution, and budget property taxes. I believe a summer study committee should be required to sit through the lecture that we are required to attend and then be able to pass the test on the impact of their changes. This person went on to say, feel free to edit, shorten, or totally ignore. I felt, first of all, I understand. Tammy understands. Dan understands. We all understand. It is a lot. And you have had a lot put at you this year, protected, unprotected. But, every year it just seems like there's more and more and more. I will have to say that your ledge committee, that's one of the reasons that they're there, that they want to work for you. If you have ideas, thoughts, or whatever, please contact them and work with them. Innovative ideas. It could be that maybe it would be good for a legislator to come and sit through to see what kind of training that you have to go through. So anytime you have an idea, you can vent to us, and I'm okay with hearing that, okay? But also, I think there's constructive channels that you can take, so please avail yourself of those as well. Do you recommend counties have a human resources department? If so, where's the department housed? This, again, it's kind of like an internal control thing, it's a question best answered by each county. You've got different circumstances. You have large counties, small counties, lots of employees, not so many employees, maybe have different complexities as far as your policies are concerned. If you have unions or something like that. So you need to make those decisions yourselves, and you also need to maybe contact some other counties that have implemented an HR department and see how that's worked out for them. As far as what department, I've heard of it being under commissioners, under the auditor's office. Again, that's going to be something that is very county specific. But you might want to talk with some other counties and see what they've found. As the secretary for commissioner and council meetings, is the auditor permitted to make any comments or suggestions? Well, I'm sure sometimes you feel like they would just want you to go away, just be quiet and write. But IC 36-2-2-11 and 36-2-3-6 give you certain duties as recording the meetings, such as recording the meetings, that as your position as clerk of these meetings that you're responsible for. There are other statutes where you as auditor have the duties to present such things as budget estimates and recommendations for those. The best advice, if it is very highly contentious and you think that there are times where you are supposed to be saying something, you might have to work with your county council, but again, it's just one of those situations that you got to work through these issues and try to develop the best relationships you can. And then grab them over to the side and say, you listen to me, because I know what I'm talking about. The law has changed for county elected officials to file official bonds yearly instead of every 4 years. What is the Indiana code for the change? Do we need to take new oaths yearly instead of every 4 years since the bond requirements have been changed? Tammy's kind of gone over that already here. IC 5-4-1-18, it was amended back in 2009 to provide that the officials have their bond for each year. In 2011, that was changed back to term. And the oath hasn't changed any, so. Do all grants that go through counties, state or federal, need to be approved by the county commissioners? As they're the executive for the county, that is something that we recommend. I know that there could be like a court out there or something that is like, It's our recommendation that it does. You know, they are the executive, but. Could you give us the basic idea of what the difference is between CAGIT, COIT, and CEDAT? Wow. Yeah, that's a lecture unto itself. So I took a little cop-out here on my answer. There are many differences between these income taxes as well as similarities. Without knowing actually the purpose of the question, in all seriousness, it's hard to point those basic differences out so that you can make good decisions. I mean, because you have, obviously, CEDAT, there has to be a plan where there doesn't have to be for the other two. And yet the percentages of total tax that you can have is different if you combine CEDAT with a COIT versus CEDAT with CAGIT. So if somebody has like a very specific question, I'd be happy to try to research that. Otherwise, you're kind of stuck with the code and doing an analysis, and as Tammy said, it could be an all-day lecture. So anyway, with that, that's all of the questions that I have. I just want to, again, just thank you so much.